gentlemen, it's time now for our financial focus. Let's bring in our money men, business and market analyst, Newsmax contributor Seth Denson, also America's accountant, accounting professor at Montclair State University, Dan Geltrude. Good morning to you both.
Morning, Rachel.
Now, House Democrats are preparing to vote on infrastructure and reconciliation bills next week. Not so sexy. And today's question is, why don't the Dems want a debt ceiling as part of that package? And Seth, I'll start with you.
Oh, listen, I think there's a number of reasons they don't want it as part of that package. But I think if we look tactically, there's a couple key things here. And one that not many people are talking about, and that is the fact that Democrats are actually limited on the number of reconciliation bills they can pass. And they have to be very specific. And one of the things that the Democrats are pushing here is a suspension of the debt ceiling. And there's a lot of scholars that are questioning whether or not that would pass parliamentary rules and procedures. That's fun for a Tuesday morning, right? But nonetheless, it's a question, and Dems don't want that. But I'll tell you a second reason. I think this is strategic. Listen, Nancy Pelosi's smart. If the government were to shut down, even if for a short period of time, history shows that polling will blame Republicans. And let's face it, Democrats these days, they need a win.
Right, and regardless, Speaker Pelosi is saying that the legislation will get passed this week. So, Dan, what's the financial impact on the country and working class families if that happens?
Well, the mantra out there is that this is only going to impact financially corporations, those big bad corporations, by the way, and all those rich people. But history has also shown that that's not true. When you start talking about that you're going to tax the rich to pay for all of this spending, it ultimately trickles down to people who are not quote unquote rich. So what I think we're looking at here is ultimately both of these bills, the bipartisan and the Build Back Better bill, will ultimately pass. In what form? Not certain yet, but I'm going to say this. More spending and more taxes are on the way for everyone.
Which is never what we want to hear. Something else Speaker Pelosi says is raising the debt ceiling will not be done through reconciliation. Seth, what exactly does that mean?
Well, again, I think she wants Republicans on board. She wants it to be part of another package or a separate package that stands alone to continue to allow for that use of reconciliation if it's needed at another time. And listen, there's that old adage, right? You break it, you buy it. And I think that to Dan's point, this next debt ceiling raise will get us over that $30 trillion mark. That is not a great campaign slogan to be used against you, is that you've now spent over $30 trillion. And if we look at even where the CBO is on this, the CBO is saying, like, listen, the numbers may be off here. There may be more that's being spent here that's being proposed.
So let's take a look at what exactly is in President Biden's expensive spending plan. Now, we've talked about this a lot, but it's good to reiterate, because we're talking $3 billion for tree equity, $4 billion for distance learning, $12 billion for electric cars, $79 billion for tax enforcement, $74 million for resource center, and $25 million for bias training. Dan, how can we afford that? Any of that?
Well, for people like you and I, we can't afford it, meaning to spend more money than we actually have. But we're talking about the federal government. And the federal government and Congress, they have unlimited powers to tax and also to print money. And that's exactly what's happening here. And by the way, let me just point out, one of the items missing on that list is free community college for illegal aliens. So let's throw that in there. And look, what we're doing here is we are moving towards European-style socialism, and I just don't think the United States should be letting others lead, particularly Europe, when it comes to finances. But it looks like that's the path we're going down, and it's not a good financial picture for us.
A lot of criticism over free college for illegal immigrants. President Biden also tweeting out a defense of that spending plan. Let's take a look at that tweet. It says, "My Build Back Better agenda costs $0. Instead of wasting money on tax breaks, loopholes, and tax evasion for big corporations and the wealthy, we can make a once-in-a-generation investment in working America, and it adds $0 to the national debt." All right, Seth, so when it says $0, are we talking just not inflation and taxes dollars, or are we just talking how can it be $0?
I have no idea.
That was so confusing.
I mean, maybe all that money is in Al Gore's lockbox. I don't know how you can spend $3.5 trillion. Actually, the CBO says that this could cost, even after Biden's tax plan, as much as up to almost $500 billion a year, which is interesting because if I just break down the math of $3.5 trillion over 10 years, that's 3.5. But anyway, nonetheless, I got no idea where this $0, maybe it doesn't cost Biden $0, but it costs every other American, because whether it's directly or indirectly through taxation, you can't pay for this without raising taxes or causing such an increase on a small subset of people, those corporations Dan was talking about, that everybody's paying for because the cost of everything's going up.
Real quickly, Dan, let me ask you, do you think Congress will come to a budget agreement, or do you see that government shutdown on the horizon?
Well, as Seth pointed out before, Republicans will get the blame for no matter what happens. So it's a tough call. I don't believe, however, that they're going to allow the government to shut down. I think with everything that's going on right now related to the pandemic and so many services that are critically needed by people in this country, it would be real tough to let the government start shutting down.
All right, we'll see by the end of the week. Seth Denson, Dan Geltrude, thank you as always.
Thanks, Rachel.